o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, any viewing audience, if they joined us through YouTube. If we could please stand for a moment of silent reflection and remain standing for O Canada. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any disclosures of conflict of interest? I can't see everyone, so Councillor Reno, Councillor Ekpata, if any, can you? I don't hear anything, so we'll assume there are none. Adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held March 23rd, 2021, and the closed meeting of council held March 23rd and 25th, 2021, be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Councillor Ekpata and Councillor Reno, if I hear nothing from you, I'll assume that's you're going along with affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mayor's comments, I have none this evening. We all know we're still in this third wave of COVID, and hopefully with vaccines and all the precautions being taken, we can get out sooner rather than later. Okay, we'll go right on to item E1, Creekside Valente development. We will start off in this order with Mr. Mara and Mr. Solani. Then we'll ask the developer, Mr. Valente, and then we will go to the delegations at that time. So Mr. Solani, Mr. Mara, whoever wants to go.
Your Worship and members of council, I'll start off and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Mara. Before you this evening, you have a report that was prepared by Mr. Mara and myself pertaining to three matters. They're all related to the Creekside development. The first matter is an application to remove the holding zone symbol from the subject properties. The second one is the site plan control application. And the third one was a petition that was submitted by residents of Serenity Circle on November 20th. With respect to the two applications, I just want to go back and provide a bit of context. This matter was first before council in 2019. So there were public meetings held in 2019, and on October 22nd, council passed the zoning bylaw at that time that rezoned this property from a C4, which is a town center commercial zone, to a site-specific R5- let me get this correctly, R5-9 zone. And what that means is previously, as of right on this site, a broad range of commercial uses could be constructed. Retail stores, restaurants, drive-throughs, personal services, just a broad range of uses like you see along Malden Road and Sprucewood in the town center that could have developed on this site. Based on the decision that was made that evening, all of those uses were removed, and the only use that's permitted on this site are apartment buildings. There are 3 proposed apartment buildings that are going to be developed as condominiums for sale. And the 3 buildings, 2 are 6-story and 1 is a 4-story building. The zoning bylaw that was prepared, which is 8358, puts in some limits with respect to where the buildings can be built. There were some concerns about the location of the building adjacent to Serenity Circle. Council decided, based on the application that was submitted and the recommendations, that it would be in line with the existing building that is on the property to the south of the subject land. So it has to be at least 15 meters away from the property line, and it's limited in height to 4 stories. So that building can't be higher than 4 stories in height, similar to the building that is located to the south. With respect to the total number of units, the total number of units on the site is restricted in the bylaw to the 178 units in 3 buildings, I believe is the total number. So following that, there was an appeal filed by the owners of the grocery store next door. And as a result of that appeal, some additional work was done and a noise study was commissioned. That noise study made some recommendations with respect to how the orientation of balconies and some fencing and noise attenuation on the property. Those recommendations have now been incorporated in the draft site plan control agreement to address those, as well as there was a class 4 designation put on the property as requested by the adjacent property owner, the owner of the shopping center. So that took place and that came back to council last year as well. And that was in March of 2020. Council passed the resolution in June that agreed with that, placed the class 4 designation on the property, and passed the resolution to require those mitigation measures to be put in the agreement, the site plan control agreement. So that brings us up to June of 2020. In the last year, the developer, their architect, and their engineers have been working with town staff, engineering and planning staff to finalize the site servicing, the landscape, and the site plan. And that is now been finalized. And you'll see the final site plan that is being recommended for approval. And it is shown as figure 1 in the staff report. It is fully compliant with the zoning bylaw that council approved back in 2019. It implements the measures that are set out in the noise study, the noise mitigation measures, and it's in conformity with the official plan. And it provides for on-site and off-site sidewalks and pedestrian facilities. And I believe the developer is going to provide some additional information about the timing of the construction of the off-site trail that is required to be constructed. They'll provide some further information to council about their timing for that construction. And as well, we have confirmed through our engineering staff and with the consulting engineering staff that the driveway approaches onto Ellis are appropriate and safe, and Mr. Mara will go into more detail about that. And we've also secured some additional parkland dedication. So adjacent to where we have the cenotaph there, we took the 5% parkland dedication to allow us to expand some of the town hall park at that location. And that's coming gratuitously to the town, and there'll be a sidewalk. So from this development, anyone living in this development will be able to come into the town park and then walk over to Zaire safely into the plaza and the rest of the town center from the connections that are being provided through this approval. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Mara, who can go through in a little bit more detail what's been done on the engineering front and speak to the petition items.
Mr. Mara.
Thank you. So I will speak to the matters of the 4 items contained within the petition. So the petition was enclosed as an attachment to the report. Item number 1 deals with a sidewalk connection that has been requested from the residents on Serenity Circle. This matter was brought forward in 2019 when this planning matter was brought forward. So town administration took this back, and we worked with the developer on having additional off-site works completed. So certainly as part of this development, this developer is responsible to build a 3-meter wide asphalt trail from Serenity Circle northerly up to Delmar. So certainly that is the responsibility of this developer. This developer is going to speak more on the timing of that. We typically don't speak to timing within the subdivision agreements or the site plan agreements. So certainly that is something that we have worked with the developer, and it is contained within the agreement for them to construct that trail. There's also a request to continue that trail all the way over to Wyoming. The town has also another site plan agreement with the southwest corner of Wyoming and Ellis. That developer is required to build the trail from Wyoming to the rest of the way to Delmar. So in essence, between 2 developers, about 50% of that trail is being paid for by the developers. There are portions of that are being picked up by the town. So certainly that will be a function of things that we have heard from the planning matters and from the planning meetings to be better implemented in order to address concerns that we heard during those matters. With respect to that petition item number 1, in response number 1, there's a word there that says contemptuously. That is the wrong word that was in the report. That's supposed to say contemporaneously. So certainly there was a wrong intention of that word. So certainly the construction of the trail was going to occur contemporaneously with the site servicing. And again, the developer will speak to the timing on when they expect to have that trail completed. With respect to petition item number 2, which speaks to access and egress from this particular site. Back in 2019, when this matter came before the rezoning and the planning matters, that was also a proposal at that time. This particular piece of property has frontage on a public open road. So certainly all properties that have frontage on a public open road gain their access from that particular public open right-of-way. So certainly that was the case with respect to what occurred with this piece of property. Should the town have said to this developer that although you have frontage on a public open road, you can't make use of that, it would really become incumbent on the town on how does the property owner gain access to the site. With respect to that, the town only owns property to the south of this site through the Cenotaph Park, through the fire department, through the police department. So if that was the case, that the town council wanted to restrict access on a public open road of a particular piece of property, it'd be incumbent on the town to try to provide that additional access point for egress and access and egress. Certainly, we could say that you have to go buy private property from someone else, but that is not what has occurred and has occurred in other areas as well. With respect to those actual access points, the developer had engaged Dillon Consulting, and they conducted a thorough traffic study of this particular site in 2019 that reviewed the location of the access points to Ellis Street. The town further, what the town did with that actual traffic analysis is we engaged Dillon to expand that traffic analysis because we knew we were being faced with other applications. Like I had mentioned, we had the application down on Wyoming in Ellis. So the town engaged Dillon to expand that traffic analysis to include all the other potential developments within this area. So we built upon that traffic analysis. And as part of what the town engaged Dillon to do was, through their traffic engineering division, look at the entirety of this area with respect to what is proposed and or what we knew was going to be built at that particular point in time. That was done in 2019 into early 2020. As part of that, if council remembers, one of the initial configurations of the westerly driveway was it was going to maintain a intersection, a three-way intersection. That has been revised to be more of a driveway approach into this particular site. So the road, Ellis Street, will make a 90-degree bend. It'll be formalized. The developer is responsible for removing some of that intersection, placing in curb to create that formal bend, similar to what is currently there, the easterly bend on Ellis. So it'll be more of a formal 90-degree curve. And that driveway access will come into the outside of the curb there and create more of a driveway approach as opposed to an intersection. So that is with respect to the access point. Item number 3 deals with the height of the building. And as Mr. Solani had indicated, that the height of the building was established at the rezoning in 2019. And petition item number 4 deals with the community mailbox, and council has dealt with that community mailbox at the March 9th, 2021 council meeting. With that, Mr. Solani, if you want to go through maybe what the recommendations are as part of the report for council.
Thanks, Mr. Mara. I'll just briefly summarize in terms of our recommendation before we have the developer make their presentation. With respect to the matters that are dealing with us, the 3 items that I mentioned that we're dealing with this evening, our recommendation is that council would grant approval to the applicant's request to remove the holding symbol at this location. Again, recognizing that in 2019, the rezoning took place and that bylaw is now in effect. The holding zone is there, was put in there for 2 reasons: to make sure the noise study was done properly, and the second reason is to make sure that there is a municipal servicing agreement through the site plan, which again is in place. We have the draft and we have the site servicing drawings that have been reviewed and approved by our engineering staff. The second recommendation is that council give approval to the site plan, the applicant's final site plan that is before you this evening, which is shown as figure 1, and that you authorize the execution of the agreement with respect to site plan control. And then the third item would be that a copy of this agreement be registered on title, and that a copy of that be sent to the Loblaws Corporation, the CP REIT, which was a condition of when the appeal was launched back in 2019. There was a commitment at that time is when the final site plan incorporating the noise mitigation measures was registered on title, that a copy of that be provided to Loblaws, who had withdrew their appeal based on that noise study. So with that, those are our recommendations as set out in this evening's staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Solani. Now we'll go to Mr. Valente.
Hi, good evening, Your Honor, members of council. Thank you for hearing our application this evening. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just here to speak in support of the application, just to remove the holding symbol. As you can imagine, considerable expense has gone into this project, and thus far, we've prepared and submitted construction drawings by engineers, architects for the first building, which is going to be run parallel with ZERS. And that's going to be 58 units, and we're hoping to start construction within 2 weeks. A lot of the contracts and tenders have been let. Suppliers have purchased, and subtrades have purchased materials, and people have hired staff. So everybody's ready to go and start construction. So I understand you have a petition before you. However, this is a Planning Act application. We've gone through numerous applications here on this property. I won't go into detail. Mr. Solani did an excellent job in rehashing the history. And I will note also, because I'm here, those people on Serenity Circle had an opportunity to review before they purchased their properties, built beautiful homes. It's a beautiful street, and we don't plan on doing anything nefarious to that development whatsoever. We built good quality projects within Essex County. But they had an opportunity to go in and talk to the town and find out what could be built there. And I believe we've come up with a very, very suitable compromise to what could be there, which could be like a 6-story building overlooking Serenity Circle with commercial on the ground level, with restaurants, different types of commercial uses that would be far more intrusive to those residents than what we're proposing here. It could be a 6-story building. It's a 4-story. And just to expand upon what Mr. Mara had indicated, I'm willing to, when we start the development, I'm willing to start the trail, to build the trail along the east side of Ellis, and we'll start that immediately with the site services. And I believe that we can have that trail in place by the time school opens for 2022 in September. Hopefully, God willing, all the children go back to school and can take advantage of using that trail that live on Serenity and on Normandy and get there in a safe manner. As Mr. Mara indicated, we hired Dylan and professional engineers and planners to examine the access points for traffic. I've had a traffic report done. They found that the intersection will work well. There's no issues with ingress and egress from the site. I understand the residents would like to see access through Normandy. Unfortunately, the town's development of municipal buildings, which is a beautiful municipal structure, the pride of Essex County, I would think, and municipalities that have built along Normandy all the way to Malden Road, and it's just not something that we can then entertain at this point. I've also brought along my planner, Carl Tanner. Should you have any questions, he's there to answer any planning questions, but I know you have some other delegations to hear from, and I'm available for questions if required.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Valenti. Okay, well, I have 5 delegates scheduled in this order: Mr. Shanfield, Mr. Elfiki, Mr. Kwan, Mr. Berry, and Mr. Hindi. And just to remind everyone, there is not a 5-minute time limit this evening on this because it's a different agenda item. So we'll try to keep the remarks short, but if you could, Mr. Shanfield, if you'd like to start. I believe all council members received your written submission, but if you'd like to add anything to that, and again, you're not limited to the 5 minutes.
Well, I would have prepared a lot more if I'd known I could do it for longer than 5 minutes, but here it goes. I hope that you've all had an opportunity to read the submissions that I prepared, the written submissions, because I really believe that the law is very important for you to consider when you're looking at this development in terms of municipal liability. As I indicated, I practiced in the area of personal injury law for 38 years, and I've sued my share of municipalities. I've sued many people, and I can tell you that based on the plan that you're looking at a lot of lawsuits in the future. And what you do tonight in terms of approving or changing this site plan is going to carry this town long into the future. You can't change it once it's done. And I think it's very important for you to consider the changes that we have requested. Mr. Valenti mentioned that he hoped that this trail would be finished in time for school in September of 2022. That's a year and a half from now. I don't think he really meant that. I think he probably meant 2021. But the point is that if you look at any development where there is construction adjacent to a sidewalk that the public uses, any responsible contractor or developer will close that sidewalk where there's construction traffic that continuously crosses that sidewalk. you can look at any of the other developments that have occurred and are occurring in this area to know the kind of construction traffic that goes in and out of these developments while they're being built. And I would suggest that if you care about the 15 elementary school students who attend Sandwich West Public School and use that sidewalk daily, that you would require the building of that trail on the east side of Ellis from across from this development, from Serenity Circle to the school before any construction begins, because people are going to be using that contemporaneously with the building of this building is not good enough as far as we're concerned, because the kids are going to be walking along that sidewalk where the construction traffic is going to be crossing, and there's going to be a problem. And that's not to mention all of the people in the other people in the community besides the kids who walk to the Zare store, walk to the Freshco, walk to all of the restaurants that are on Malden Road. We should not have to walk along a sidewalk that, number one, traffic is coming in and out of, and number two, is going to be a sloppy mess that we're going to have to cross through. So I think you should see your way clear to requiring this sidewalk to be done before any of the construction on this site begins. That's all I have to say about the sidewalks. Regarding the roadways in this development, I think you need to know that a vehicle traveling 50 kilometers an hour travels 13.89 meters per second. Now, if you look at the drawing in the agenda to this meeting, the distance from the curve where Ellis curves to the west to the most easterly driveway proposed for this development is 41.25 meters. So 13.89 meters a second, 41.25 meters distance. The vehicle rounding that curve reaches that driveway in less than 3 seconds. So in the time that it takes a driver exiting that driveway to look to the curve, to see traffic, seeing none, look to the west for traffic coming from that other direction and pulling out, a vehicle rounding that curve is upon him or her in less than 3 seconds. And no driver can possibly react appropriately in that short period of time. Now, think about it. Do the math. 178 residential units, 275 vehicle spaces. If even half the vehicles leave that development daily, that's 137 vehicle exits from unsafe driveways every single day. Lineups, picture it, lineups of people impatiently trying to leave the development, pulling out into traffic that is coming around that curve. The developer's representative told you that 3,500 vehicles a day use that road. Quoting from the administration's report, quote, "This public street is a collector road that has been designed and built to handle the traffic that will be generated by this new residential development," end quote. It does not say, quote, "safely," end quote. At our community mailbox hearing on March the 9th, I showed you a photograph of the bumper to bumper congested traffic along northbound Ellis heading toward that curve. Doesn't it seem to you, even as lay people, to be a recipe for disaster? As I tried to point out in my written submissions, not only are people's lives in danger, but the town will foot the bill for each and every accident that occurs at that location. If you approve the site plan roadways as drawn, your legacy will be one of being responsible for the town becoming liable for accidents, which will surely happen at that location. If you want to endorse a plan that allows you to hold your head up high as being responsible and prudent mayor and councilors, you will only consider a proposal that sees the roadways within this development safely enter and exit on Normandy Road, east of the Public Works Yard, where there's a berm right now, and west of the police station, where there's a road coming off of Normandy already. Mr. Mayor, you told us on March the 9th that you were pro-development. That's a laudable position to take. Any successful municipality needs growth to thrive. However, the other side of the coin is your duty to be balanced, responsible, and responsive to the existing community's concerns. Your administration appears to be so immersed in the effort to ensure this development happens that it's willing to overlook the dangers that poor planning present. You can perform your necessary oversight duties by sending the developer back to the drawing board to make the changes necessary, not only for ourselves, but for the town and the community at large. I'm very concerned about the liability that these entrances and exits onto a very small strip of road that's dangerously configured. And as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay taxes to contribute to personal injury victims who are injured as a result of accidents at this site. So the administration has suggested that you've got to cut this wide swath of land into the park. That's not true. There's a roadway there already beside the police station. It just needs to be extended into this development. And on the other side, if you need a second entrance and exit, right beside the Public Works Department is a berm that is not being used for anything other than sound attenuation for the apartments or the condos that are east of that berm. A road can be cut through there, a fence can be put up to attenuate the noise as well. And you eliminate all of the concern about the entrances and exits being on a dangerous S-curve. They empty out onto Normandy Road, where the sight lines are for miles, basically, not miles, but for a long way on the left and the right. And you're not going to have to worry about people suing the town of LaSalle for accidents that occur. Those are my submissions. The only other thing I would say is that I had asked to be involved in the hearings that that this development engendered with council. And I'm hearing tonight that there were a number of hearings that I had no idea were happening. And so I didn't have the opportunity, nor did my fellow residents have the opportunity to speak to these matters any earlier than this.
Thank you, Mr. Shanfield. Do we have Mr. Elfiki? I don't believe, Mr. Militia, you can see everyone easier than I. He's not present, okay. And is it Mr. Huan? He's there?
Hi, Mayor. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name incorrectly.
My last name is Chen, but it's okay. It's
Chen,
hard to
okay,
pronounce.
sorry.
I believe, yes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm here to talk because I want to support Mr. Shanfield. I'm not going to talk into details about whatever Mr. Shanfield is saying. He is professional, but I just want to share two incidents with you. The first one is when I was working with my family, 2 kids on the sidewalk on Annis to Sears. Because this is special time, COVID-19, we have to keep social distance along with the other party who is also using the pedestrian. We have to stop on the sidewalk or the side of the sidewalk, and there are cars flying by. I have no clue why they are doing that, but it is happening, and it is dangerous to whoever, not only kids, but also pedestrians who is using it. So I hope the trail or the sidewalk can be finished before any of the construction begins for this Creekside project. The second incident is I want to share is, I think last week there was a electric wire hanging on the cross section of Normandy and Addis, and there is a police car has to be stopped there to address this dangerous and then to reroute all the cars who wants to access to Annis to reroute through whatever the street. Imagine there are 178 units here and this incident is happening again. What would be the traffic situation? I cannot imagine, but I think you guys can do something to avoid this happening. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. Do we have Mr. Berry?
Yes, I'm here, and
Okay, thank you.
thank you for this time, Mr. Mayor. I just want to highlight first to full support of Mr. Schanfield for his presentation and the dangers he highlighted. It is not only the danger, this danger will come to our kids who are crossing the road, going to the school. So I am very concerned and this safety comes first. And I would like to have the resolution for kids going to school, crossing the street, even the pedestrian going while this additional traffic coming onto this road, what statistics Mr. Schanfield has mentioned. With this additional traffic, which is what much more than what currently has, and still it is difficult for kids to crossing the road, and sometimes it is difficult even to ingress egress into the Serenity Circle. The school time, it is bumper to bumper vehicle, getting out of it, it is sometimes we need to wait for a little bit. So I am very concerned for the kids' safety as we are living here, and the time we came here, it was very clear, and day by day the traffic is increasing, and additional project what is coming on to the Wyoming and Ellis intersection that will add traffic onto this road. Besides whatever additional traffic coming with the Creekside, project. So I would request to please consider, think about it, what presentation Mr. Schanfield has done. He has done thorough and brought all the dangers. And of course, nobody would like to pay any kind of liability or suit and coming this onto the taxpayers. So, and additionally, this sidewalk, what was presented with my fellow and colleagues here, it has to be done before any construction will start on the project. And besides that, I want to highlight also, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned you are pro-development, and that is where the residents are coming with strong emphasis and planning and bringing it to you to please consider this pro-development changes what we are asking. And this additional traffic, we asked in March 9th one for the mailbox layaway. And with the additional traffic, it is much more danger for us to stop by and pick the mail from the mailbox. So please consider all those dangers, what we are going to face, not only the Serenity Circle resident, but anybody else in the neighborhood community. And that's it. This is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. And I see Mr. Hindi.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Hindi. I live at 2008 Serenity Circle. My home is directly across from the new development that's going to be happening. I respect and understand development and growth in LaSalle, but I also need to be respected in this matter. I think it's fair to say that everyone would have these concerns about the development if this was your house. When I purchased this property, it was known not to have any backyard neighbors, and there was no zoning for this type of development that's going to go on beside me. Only to find out later that a 4-story building is going up, and now I'm going to have somewhat of 25 units, maybe more, looking onto my yard. Now having a building of that sort looking onto my property is definitely going to depreciate my home. Sometimes we shy away from having a couple neighbors looking in. I think privacy is very important, as anyone would, and the taxes that are required on my property should definitely give me that privacy. I've looked at the site plans and clearly would like building A to be moved toward the pavilion and garage B1 area. Looking at this site plan from the corner of Ellis, where it shows the building is 6.9 meters on the one side away from the corner. This is an oncoming traffic issue, okay? Honestly, I don't want any balconies to be on that corner looking onto my yard. I mean, I think that's fair to say. This is horrible. And I really want mature trees to be planted on the development property, blocking all viewing of my property. What is the plan timeline? When is construction going to start on the building that's closest to me? And how long until completion? This is another important issue because dust and numerous debris that is going to be blowing over to me. I'm not going to be a happy neighbor. And when my house is covered in dirt and garbage, I mean, like, this is horrible. It's bad enough when we have a home built on our street, let alone a building and development of this nature that's so close to me. Talking about that bend from Ellis, from Serenity to behind Zares, this is an already dangerous, sharp turn. The buses and transport trucks already stop traffic in order to make that turn. Someone last week jumped the curb and crashed into breaking down that the yellow turn signal. Living here, trust me when I say it, it happens every day. The constant horns blaring, the close calls, it's all a bit much. Now, all of that is without the building and being able to see the oncoming traffic. Now, put a building so close to that corner with how sharp that turn is, and now not being able to see oncoming traffic anymore, it won't be long until there'll be an accident there, and maybe even in my backyard. Again, everybody in my shoes would have these concerns. I'm not being crazy. I have young children, I need them safe, and I need privacy. I do not want building A to be built on that proposed site plan. I am against it and can't see why it can't be moved. I've been a resident of LaSalle my whole life. If it affects one of us, it affects all of us. I feel strongly about these matters, and I want them to be taken seriously. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hindi. I will say, Mr. Militia.
Mr. Mayor, again, we understand that Mr. Elfiki is on the line. He's dialed in and is not on a video call. So I think he has the phone dial in with the last three digits 104. So
Okay.
if Mr. Elfiki would like to, I believe he's muted his mic on his end. So if he has a presentation, now would be the appropriate time to unmute the mic and give the verbal presentation.
Thank you for that information. Mr. Elfiki, are you available to speak? Joe, just curious, are you can you unmute him? Is that a possibility?
We cannot unmute him. He has to unmute on his end.
Okay. Well, we'll proceed, and if he does come on the line, we'll listen to him. Mr. Hindi and Mr. Shanfield, and all the delegates, thank you for your concerns. I don't think any councilor says they're not valid concerns. Everybody's gone through issues with development somewhere, not in my backyard, across the street, and anywhere there's development. It's always a concern, and there's many concerns, and privacy and safety are always the two top ones. So,
I think I'm unmuted now. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Elfiki.
Thank you very much for allowing me to talk And thank you and good evening. And I want to thank Mr. Shanfield for his nice presentation. I echo all his concerns. I want to thank Michael for my neighbor on the corner of the street there. I'm in the deeper end of Serenity, but I feel for all my neighbors, and I think all the concerns there are quite legitimate. You've heard all of us, talking about the sidewalk. I am in favor, and I hope you support that the sidewalk on the east side of Ellis, regardless of the development, would be completed as soon as possible and not later on. And we do have a traffic issues and I on Ellis Street, and I don't know, I'm sure if you guys have driven around, let's say around 3:30 or so when the public schools buses exit, or if you have seen the actual Windsor Transit bus going through Ellis at the corners, at the bends, the concerned bends, what does it look like to the traffic behind it? Essentially, that bend does not take anything beside a bus or a bigger vehicle. They cannot be two vehicles of any size if one of them is that kind of a bigger vehicle. So please make the right decision, balancing the interest of the neighborhood and the interest of development. We all want LaSalle to be better. We just want to align our interests together. I don't think it's too much of an ask, to support safety of the neighborhood, safety of the kids, traffic issues. That mailbox is a big, annoying location, and is going to be a nightmare, in the future. I wonder where the mailbox for the development is going to be, and I hope it's not going to be the same one we're sharing right now. And I'm sure tonight you've heard enough concern that will support you make the right decision that balances the interests here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alfiki. We'll open it up to council questions. Councillor Carrick, then Councillor Reno, then Councillor Ekpad.
Okay, well, just for you to Mr. Tanner, Peter's planner there from Dillon. So they brought up some concerns around the cornering and basically the traffic, and I know we did the expanded the corner a little bit there. So can you explain what their comments have meant to what your planning brought forward and what you're dealing with and what they're telling us? They're owning the busing and et cetera, and that kind of issue. Even understand this is a collector road, and this road was probably built for this. So if you could just touch on that for a minute.
Certainly, and through you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Mara may want to add to this as well at some point. You're absolutely correct. Both Trinity, Ellis, it's designated as a collector road. It's designed to carry significant volumes of traffic. Right now, the volumes are actually quite light for a collector road, and you would find greater traffic demands on a collector road. So over time, it is intended to increase. It's just the way that the road is designated in the official plan. Having said that, having two bends at the corners, 290-degree bends, acts as traffic calming. It slows traffic down. I don't disagree that when you have large vehicles making the turns, that sometimes, depending on the size of those vehicles, that it may seem very tight. And it may require drivers to stop to allow the vehicle to come through. No different than any other road in any other municipality. I believe the posted speed limit on this road is 40, which is quite low. And again, when our traffic engineers looked at it, they've looked at both the configuration of the road with respect to this development, also within the larger context, as Mr. Maher had mentioned. It functions fine. It meets all the tax standards, and the position of the driveways. The first one, which is on the kind of between the two bends, has adequate separation from the corners. We did note that there were some improvements required at the end of Trinity as it turns on to Ellis, and that's where Mr. Mara was indicating that right now it sits as kind of like a T intersection. The western leg will be removed, curving will go in, and it will mimic the curve to the east, and then a driveway will basically be constructed into the development. We feel, and I think administration can speak to this as well, that the proposed design meets all the tax standards. It's safe in terms of access. It's posted at the appropriate speed limit, and the separation from driveway to curb is fine. I'd like to point out to council also that the separation from the northerly curve to Trinity is only marginally more than the curve to the driveway to the apartment building. And so I believe it's about 60 meters. These things are set up sometimes, in order to slow traffic down. And as a result, like I said, we've looked at the entire area, and it's our transportation engineer's opinion that it's fine and there's no issues.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Mr. Carrick, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, I still have a couple more. So, well, thank you for the second entrance, because I brought that up in the previous meeting there, the one closest to Alice, or the Trinity Circle there. The again, through you to administration, and talking about trying to get onto Normandy and the logistics of that, because that doesn't work. There's no way I'm going to allow something to go through the town property, understanding that down the road we don't know what's going to go on with the town property for future say. So talk to me about how that probably can't work, because you're coming out and it's not even a street.
Mr. Martin. You're muted, Peter.
Thank you. You saw my lips moving. I'm glad you got that. So certainly access out to Normandy becomes difficult with respect to how the town has developed. Certainly the secured yard and site of the police department and the fire department are very important aspects for the town. Again, police have a lot of things that they deal with on a daily basis, and certainly they need to have a secure location for things such as the items that they come across from a day-to-day basis. So certainly, as you can appreciate and see, the police department yard, there's a driveway between the police department and the fire department, which goes into their secured compound. Certainly that would not be able to be accommodated. Again, from the fire department standpoint, we need drive-through bays. By cutting this in half, certainly that would be very difficult to have drive-through bays. It would interfere with the security of a compound for the police department. As you look towards the west of the police department, you're then into the Cenotaph Park, which is a nice civic plaza that the town has encompassed and built in honor of our veterans and a lot of the other passive recreational activities that we have within that park. So that would be intrusive to the development of that park. With respect to the berm, that is actually private property. The town doesn't own that property. That is actually property that is owned by that other condo site. So certainly if that had to occur, that would have to be through purchase of property from a private property owner to gain access. Certainly the old salt dome, which is used for the fire department training center, is also in the way to gain access. So it becomes very difficult with respect to how and if they could actually get out to Normandy. And for those reasons, again, at the planning stage and the zoning, the rezoning stage, the accesses were maintained on the public open right of way that this property has frontage on.
Okay, so just final for now, maybe later on some other questions. Anyways, the trail, that's a great idea. I think sooner than later. I'm not going to hold up the development because of that, but I do think as soon as Peter, Mr. Valenti and I can get that in there, the better off it'll be. That's my concerns right now.
Thank you, Mr. Carrick. Mr. Reno, Councilor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to first talk about the sidewalk trail that everyone's been talking about. I assume that in the schematic or in the diagram here that's the dark gray trail that's on the same that would be the east side of Ellis. Correct me if I'm wrong, that wouldn't be something that this development is going to put in. Would that not be a subsequent development? You talked about two different developments in your opening speech. Would that not be the other development?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it is that heavier, thick line that is on the site plan. Typically, developers are responsible for the things that happen on their side of the road with respect to developments. In this particular instance, there was an existing sidewalk on the side of the development. So Mr. Valenti, as part of his development, is actually paying for the trail that begins at Serenity Circle entrance. It heads northerly around the bend up to the other bend. So that is the portion that Mr. Valenti is paying for. The town is picking up the cost from that bend northerly to Delmar, because again, Mr. Valenti doesn't have any development occurring in that location. So that is a 3-meter wide asphalt trail that is being constructed. So as part of Mr. Valenti's commitment and requirement, the trail from Serenity Circle northerly to Delmar will be constructed. The notion of the rest of the way to Wyoming is part of a separate site plan agreement for the property at the southwest corner of Trinity and Wyoming. So certainly that developer will build it from Wyoming to Delmar. So it will be one contiguous trail over time being built through here. And about 50% of that is being paid for by development and 50% of that's being paid for by the taxpayers. So certainly that is what will happen over time again. And so that's how that will transpire. And that's the location of the trail that you had questions about.
Thank you very much. That helps me with any decision we have to make about that sidewalk and any requests we can make. My next question would be for Mr. Hindi. We've dealt with Building A 2 years ago in a meeting. And at that time, we talked about the trees getting put onto basically your side of the street and how that could give you privacy. And there's been diagrams and sight lines and all this kind of stuff presented here. I just want to know your feelings about those trees. I mean, I don't think at this point we can go back and change Building A because we've already made that decision. But if those trees are inadequate, if they need to be taller or longer, what are your feelings that you're coming to try to get more privacy? Is that inadequate in your feelings?
I'm not aware of where you're going to be planting trees. You're saying you want to plant them on my side of the property?
I'm looking currently at the diagram that was presented as Figure 1 Valente Street, Valente. And on that, I see a whole row of black cedars that are basically just, I'm going to say south of the curve, adjacent to that trail. I would imagine they line up with your backyard, but planning or Mr. Tanner could probably speak to that better. But I just know that we talked about this as being something that would save your privacy. And if you're here to say that they're not, I want to know, what has to be done here.
Mr. Tanner?
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. That's a great question. And it's a good example of how when things happen over time, people forget as well, right? Or people don't recall what was actually agreed to. This goes back to, I believe, 2019, the zoning bylaw amendment for the property when it was before council. And it was agreed to that we would plant cedars along the boulevard, the town-owned property, adjacent to 2008 Serenity Circle. And I believe, and I'm again, I recall, I believe Mr. Hindy's wife may have made the request at one point as part of the zoning bylaw amendment, and council incorporated into the plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tanner. Councilor Reno, any other questions?
Those are the two things. I'm concerned about Mr. Hindy's privacy, and I understand that the building is where the building is going to be. So I'm not looking to speak to the building, but I want to make sure that he understands that those trees are there for him. If he feels that they're the wrong type of tree, or if this is kind of the chance to speak, but it looks like to me, everything's been mitigated the way we talked about it 2 years ago. So I just want to make sure that that's done. And it sounds like the trail is something that we can work with. Maybe I can put the question to Mr. Valente. I mean, I would assume that if putting in this trail early helps speed along things, I would imagine that wouldn't be a problem, but I can't speak for him. Mr. Valente, is that something that is workable at this point?
Mr. Valente?
Yes, we'll start the trail when we start the site services, and it'll be in by 2021 September.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
While we're on the trail question, Peter, you stated that the other development, which I'm aware of, will do northerly from Wyoming. Do we have a proposed start date for that development?
At this point, I believe the site plan agreement was put together. That was an executed site plan agreement. We don't have any idea of timing of when that work will occur. So I can't provide that detail at this point.
I would assume prior to start of September school year, hopefully. But it's a guess. Okay. It's just, it'd be nice if we knew, and then we could get that whole trail system completed. I'm sorry, Mr. Hindi, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Now I do see that with the cedar trees, and they are planted on the other side of the asphalt sidewalk. I do see that now. Thank you for noting that. But you know what I mean? Like, these cedar trees are going to be on the other side. Like, I want them to be on the development side. That's why I said that. Now these trees are the way they grow, they're going to be blocking all sunlight in my backyard. Now, I'm not going to tell you my problems about my pool and all the stuff that I have in my backyard. But these, I want these to be planted on the development side, blocking the view to at my house. You know what I mean? And this asphalt sidewalk, nothing against asphalt, but we got nice cement sidewalks everywhere. And we're going to put this black asphalt sidewalk now. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to complain too much, but LaSalle is beautiful with all these nice concrete sidewalks. Like, now this is going to be on the side of my house.
I'll answer that one. That's not a sidewalk, it's a trail. And the difference is the trail system is for multiple people and multi-use as opposed to a sidewalk. So we have a pretty good high standard that we're keeping up with the trail system. And Mr. Mara and Mr. Slaney, I think it's 3 meters wide, and that's across the whole municipality. Councillor Akpata.
Sir, I give you my time back. Councillor Carrick asked the question that I wanted to ask.
Okay. Any other? Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. My question would be to Mr. Mara. I know Mr. Shin had presented the idea of taking the driveway and changing it to a Normandy area. I did not realize that property was privately owned, so that kind of answered part of my question. But realistically, is that berm even large enough to create a driveway or an exit from that development?
Thank you. Certainly, when we look at access and egress, fire code has to be taken into consideration. So, you know, a minimum width of an access road is typically 20 feet wide, 6.2 meters wide. And certainly having one long access point becomes concerns from fire safety standpoint. Again, you can imagine if that roadway gets blocked, you really can't get into the site and things of that nature. So certainly you do need to be able to construct a proper, adequate access road. And if it's one single access, I would say that it has to be wider than 20 feet. Again, if you get it blocked, you need to be able to get vehicles passing by there. So it does become cumbersome and difficult on trying to get a long access road, access route, road, however we want to classify this as, whether it's a public right of way. Again, if it's a public right of way, we need 66 feet, 20 meters wide right of way in order to be able to provide that service. If it's not a public road and it's a private road, it becomes problematic from that standpoint. So it becomes difficult just from the aspect of how far removed it is from Normandy relative to the length of the access route and public safety from the development itself. Again, 170 units coming all out through a 20-foot wide stretch of pavement would become pretty difficult if that pavement or that access route becomes blocked with an accident, something of that nature, where the people can't get in and out of the site. So again, I hope that answers your question, Deputy Mayor Malash.
Just if I can add just one thing to what Mr. Mara said. That berm was put in there at the time through an agreement with the developer of that property. So when that property came forward, there was a requirement that the berm be constructed on private property and maintained in perpetuity. So we do not have the ability to remove that at all and to use it. It belongs to the condominium corporation, and it was put in there as part of an agreement at the time that was constructed. So the town doesn't have even the ability, even if we wanted to do so, we don't have the ability to go onto that private property that's owned by the condominium corporation. With respect to the privacy of the homeowner that lives across the street, that was reviewed in detail at the time, 2019, when the architect and the consulting planners for Valente was required to go back and say, how do we provide maximum privacy? And there were two things. One was lowering the height of the building to 4 stories, and as opposed to 6 stories. And the other one was they did the calculation that you had to plant the trees at that location. If you tried to plant trees on the other side of the road, which is where the condominium would be, it does not, those trees would never be high enough to provide that privacy at that location. So this is to provide a screen. It's a fence type screen that's 18 feet in height, 5 feet on center, and it was designed by the architects to provide that privacy given the distance of where the building is and the height of the building in the rear yard of that property. So that's how it was designed for that purpose. You're not just able to shift it to the other side of the road. It won't provide the privacy.
Thank you, Mr. Salami, for the history. Deputy Member Malas.
Okay, so Mr. Mara, thank you. I appreciate the explanation. That's exactly what I needed to know is it something we could do? And obviously safety is an issue when you mentioned all the things that would go along with that. And I would be very surprised if anybody at that condo corporation were in agreement to sell that berm to have a driveway going next to those buildings that are on the main level. I believe from all the discussion we've had that our traffic study has met all the standards that we've mentioned. I know we've done traffic studies throughout the entire municipality, as well as Mr. Tanner spoke to the one that they did for this development. And I feel confident that we've covered everything. I know it seems like a busy road, and we've got so many of those throughout our municipality that we always are concerned about traffic. But I believe that we've covered everything in this situation. My last thing that I actually wanted to talk about is listening to everyone about the path that's going in, the trail system. Is it possible, because I believe sooner than later is required, we don't want to be starting construction on this and not have a safe place for our residents to go to and from school, to and from Zares, anything. Is it possible for the town to do the entire portion and charge back the 2 developers who are going to be doing the other portions when it's time? Just for planning purposes, it seems to make sense that we would did it all at once, but then we can guarantee that it's done in a timely manner. So is that even an option?
Mr. Mara.
Currently, the way it is set up within the 2 agreements, one agreement is finalized. We can't go back to that agreement where that agreement at the property on Wyoming there says that the developer will build it and the town will pay our share of it. So that has been established already. This agreement, there is an opportunity maybe within this agreement. We would have to have some discussions with Mr. Valente if that is an option, and we would have to reverse the language within the agreement where he contributes money to the town in exchange for the town building that trail. But again, that's maybe a bit of a timing issue for Mr. Valente because again, we have the agreement. It is in a position where it's about to be signed. So certainly I would have to turn to Mr. Valente if that is something that we could work through, and or if council wish that that is kind of the mechanism on how we would have to deal with that. But from Delmar to Wyoming, that has already been established and put into an agreement.
Okay.
Mr. Carrick, or Councillor Carrick, sorry.
I think Sue was before me, if that's okay, Your Worship.
I didn't see your hand. Sorry, Councillor Desjardins.
No, that's okay, actually, because Mr. Solani answered my one question and then the deputy mayor asked my second question. So I'm good on the answers. I think that we have covered our bases. I think we've looked at the studies and worked with the developer to try and make things better for everybody all around. So I just want to get this trail system lengthened as soon as possible, just to keep everybody safe.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Councillor Carrick.
Okay, so just some final comments. So anyways, I'd like to thank the residents for coming forward, Mr. Shanfield, Mr. Hindi, and the other ones. So your comments are taken well, and it's really forced some changes here, whether you believe it or not, that it's really forced some changes from the start. I'd also like to thank Mr. Valenti for bringing this forward. Times are still tough. We're in a pandemic. Everything's crazy money. It's really busy. I mean, really expensive to do stuff, and it's only getting more costly. So thank you again for bringing development to the town, because it's much needed. And lastly, I'm just going to say this. I've been doing this since 2000. For the most part, with a 4-year vacation, we'll call it that. But having said that, I've dealt with our administration for a long time, and they're amongst the best in the province. So understanding that we've been through this many times, and the advice they give us and what we do, planning and everything else, I think goes a long way, and I trust them 100%. So if they're steering us wrong, then shame on us. But I don't see that since 2000. We haven't had too many issues as far as outlining and other things go. So I just want to say thank you guys for everything, the residents for coming forward, Mr. Valente and our administration for doing a good job and making sure that we keep development moving and we do it in a safe manner. Thank you.
Council's pleasure. Councillor Carrick.
For the recommendation, move.
Support by Deputy Mayor Malash. Discussion. I just want to make a couple comments. Mr. Shanfield made some comments, and before I speak about Mr. Shanfield, everyone, we're here to make a decision that's best for the municipality. If we just changed all the rules based on everyone's concerns, whether it's Mr. Hindy's privacy, we have dealt with that and many other developments. Yes, I'm pro-development, as long as it's done properly, safely. And Mr. Shanfield, if I needed a lawyer for your specialty, I'd go to you. But we have specialists like Mr. Mara, who's a PN, Mr. Tanner, Mr. Solani's probably the best planner in Ontario, if not Canada. So when we come to poor planning and comments like that, I take that to heart, because I would back these guys to the wall anytime. It's discouraging when you spend that kind of money in a home and then you see development where you probably didn't think there was going to be development. But again, it's something that it's dependent on the homeowner who's spending that kind of money to see what could possibly happen. I've been doing this 11 years. The most common complaint I get is, not in my backyard, I'm losing my privacy. Well, then you have to take matters in your own hand and buy that property so they can't develop it. Otherwise, we'd be sitting here possibly with a development next door to you where there's bars go until 1 a.m. and cars leaving and drinking and hooting and hollering in the parking lot. Now we have Mr. Valenti, who's a premier developer in Essex County, giving us a first-class product. We've had the engineering studies, the traffic studies. I think they've accommodated all the requests. And when I say I'm pro-development, that keeps your taxes lower. There was a comment made that I pay a lot of taxes. We all pay a lot of taxes. Because you pay more because you have a bigger house, doesn't give you more privileges. You still get fire protection, police protection, everything else. I just built a house. Doesn't matter what I pay in taxes. I get the same benefits as all the residents. No one's above the others. So let's just keep that in mind. But I do want to give a big shout out to Mr. Valenti. This is not the best time to be spending a lot of money. Obviously, the return hopefully is there, because construction costs, we all know, are extremely high. Whatever you're doing right now is costing more than you would have 2-3 years ago. So on the motion, all in favor? I'm just making sure. I can't see Anita, sorry. I see everyone except Anita, so I don't hear anything. I'm assuming she's in favor. She hasn't said anything otherwise.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Richo Spaniolo is having a bit of technical issues, but she did type in the chat that she is in favor of the recommendation.
I just saw that. Okay, So on that motion, that carries unanimously. Thank you again, all the delegates for coming forward this evening, and Mr. Tanner, Mr. Valenti, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Okay, item E2, LaSalle Small Coast Waterfront consultation and next steps. Is Don and Kevin? I have many faces on my screen. So there's Don. And is Kevin? Oh, there he is. Sorry, Kevin. All right. Who's taking the lead?
I will do that, Mayor
Okay.
Bondi. I am just going to share my screen. Okay, thank you, Mayor Bondi and members of council. Tonight, I'm going to do a brief overview for you to give you an idea of the type of feedback that we received through the consultation process for the waterfront project. To start off, the engagement tactics that we used, we did create 7 videos that were shared on social media and on the town's website that brought in a combined total of over 1,750 views. We did send out about 12,000 copies of the LaSalle Messenger were mailed to residents of LaSalle. That was in March. And we also sent out monthly email blasts in both February and March. We do have over 3,800 subscribers on those email blasts. The open rate on those is 30 to 35% each month on average. We did use placespeak.com, which was a new avenue for us to do engagement. Normally we would do engagement in person, but because of COVID this year, of course, we had to change that a little bit. So we did use engagement software called placespeak.com, which was a hub that held all the information for us about the waterfront project. So through that, we picked up 322 connects. So these are people who registered on the page to follow the page to receive updates about the project. Of those 322 people, 291 were from LaSalle. Others were from Windsor, Amherstburg, Lakeshore, and Tecumseh. We did do a survey as well. 125 surveys were completed, and 102 of those were from LaSalle. There are 106 comments made on the discussion page. 103 were from LaSalle, and the majority of those comments were positive and in favor of the project. Overall, there was over 2,800, almost 2,900 unique views of the project. So this has shown us that engagement in LaSalle has been robust when you look at the waterfront project as well as the Malden Road project and the St. Clair Park project that we've had online as well. With engagement, when you speak with engagement, most people just want to be informed. So the views are an important metric to us as well. It's not just the discussion or the surveys, but having people log in and look at the information is important as well. Typically, we would hold in public sessions, and we would hold 2 or 3 sessions over a week-long period usually, and we would receive a handful of submissions back from people in that format. So using PlaySpeak has far exceeded our expectations on these projects and given us a lot of additional feedback that we wouldn't normally receive. We do feel that once we can return to in-person public information centers, it would still be important to be able to use PlaySpeak to allow people to look at the information on their own time and be able to comment at their will and when they're available to do so. We will be building an engagement page on our website, on the town's website, that will host all of our projects, giving people the ability to find all the information in one spot. And the information does remain on that site. So even though we've closed this consultation period, anybody is welcome to look at the information that is on the placespeak.com page. We will continue to update that if we have more information to share so that that becomes the real information hub about the project. So just to give you an idea with respect to the survey, one of the questions, in the last 2 years, why did you visit Front Road Park and or Gilmore Park? The top 3 answers were for physical activity, to disconnect and relax, and to connect with nature and wildlife. Another question, what would you like to see at the Small Coast Waterfront in order for you to spend a few hours at the park? The top 3 answers were washrooms, walking trails, and natural areas, wildlife, flower gardens, and trees. With respect to the boat ramp and the marina, the business focus group talked a lot about the boat ramp and transient boat slips, as many of the attendees represented the local marinas. With respect to the transient docks, the marinas did ask for some information in writing from LaSalle as to how we would operate those docks. With respect to boating tourism, there was a high response rate asking for a good restaurant along the waterfront, as that would attract boaters. With respect to the transient boat slips and the possibility of a refueling station, those who responded felt that the refueling station would be a big attraction. Between Amherstburg and Windsor, there's no other refueling station, and boaters often go to the US to refuel their boats and to visit restaurants in that area. The marinas felt that it didn't make sense for them to have a fuel station, but with the municipality offering it, it could help the entire area and the entire boating area and all the marinas along Front Road. With respect to the playground, the water feature, and the skate trail, we did ask a question in the survey. In winter or colder weather, what would you bring to the Small Coast? What would bring you to the Small Coast Waterfront Park? The top 3 answers were food and or beverage opportunities, ice skating, and trails. With respect to commercial opportunities, as part of our business focus group, some of the responses that we received were to consider putting a 2nd-story restaurant in the event center so that they could oversee the entire area. They were questioning if the town would be open to talking to private owners to be able to go into public-private partnerships with them. And there was a request that the town be sure to reach out to all restaurants on Front Road to ensure that their voices are heard. I just want to mention that for the business focus group, we did send out over 100 letters to businesses in the area, inviting them to attend the focus group. One of the survey questions was asking what type of businesses people would like to see in the area. The top 3 answers were coffee shops, restaurants, and a market. With respect to the event center, we did a focus group with Tourism Windsor Essex Pelee Island, and they felt that the event center is a welcome addition to this area, that there is a lack of space for people to rent in this area, especially a big event space such as this. There is the capability to section off the event center for smaller uses to make it more flexible. They really liked the idea of it opening up onto the water and being able to hold an indoor-outdoor event at the same time. One of the questions from the survey, what type of events would interest you most to go to the Small Coast Waterfront Park? The top 3 answers were a food event and a food truck, a farmer's market or an outdoor market, and a music performance. With respect to dog-friendly in a dog park, some respondents would like to see dog-friendly patios. And this we have looked into a bit. This has been discussed at the provincial level, and they are looking at the option to allow food premise owners to use their discretion to permit dogs in outdoor eating areas. And most would like to see a dog park somewhere in LaSalle, and that is planned in the 2021 budget coming forward later this year. With respect to sports courts and fitness opportunities, according to our active living focus group, tennis is a growing sport in this area. The groups representing tennis asked for 6 courts rather than 4. They gave the example of the courts at St. Clair College. They're new courts that have been constructed really well. They suggested that we look into that construction to be sure that the surface is durable and good for use for outdoor use, something that's going to last for a long time. They suggested putting up windscreens that perhaps we could sell sponsorships on. They also requested considering a dome in winter for outdoor courts so that it could become a year-round sport. They did request benches inside the tennis courts to allow people to rest. And that group also talked about a high demand for beach volleyball. So keeping the sand volleyball courts down in that area would be important to them. One of the survey questions, what type of sporting activities would you like to see? The top 3 answers were trails for walking or biking, ice skating, and rowing, kayaking, and canoeing. With respect to the water sports, there was some concern asking for a canoe or kayak launch, as there isn't one in the current plans, but it is something that we're looking at for future plans. With respect to heritage and the museum, the Benoit House, Tourism Windsor Essex Pelee Islands suggested that they like the attention to the Francophone heritage, as it's a priority of our federal and provincial governments. Definitely could see some partnerships with Indigenous groups. The Heritage and Culture Focus Group suggested looking at the operating model, whether it would be volunteer driven or one with municipal staff operating it. They did suggest considering with the big windows in the building to be careful to control the light flow into the building so that it doesn't fade any of the artifacts or maps that we could have on display. They suggested perhaps an amphitheater between the carriage house and the garage for musical entertainment. They did suggest making sure there's extra plugs and outlets and lighting at the time of construction to put in even more than you think you're going to need and to be able to host different types of events on the property. And including history of the Detroit River, as the Detroit River plays a very important role in LaSalle. One of the questions from the survey was asking what people would like to see at the Benoit House or the museum. The top 3 answers were historical artifacts, museum exhibits, and events. With respect to natural living areas, the Active Living Focus Group talked about grants that we may be able to work with the Ontario Horticultural Society to obtain in the future. The LaSalle Horticultural Society said that they could help enhance the gardens by river dance. They suggested more gardens around the new community center once it's built, including naturalized gardens, a fountain, and perhaps a totem pole. The Heritage and Culture Focus Group talked about habitat restoration, the importance of the loss of habitat on the Detroit River, and being able to restore some of that habitat, similar as we did when Riverdance was built. With respect to the beach area, there were not a lot of comments about that. Some concerns were made with respect to the location, the proposed location, and suitable water flow, something that we would look at. With respect to a retention pond, we received one suggestion to make it a shallow pond and to use that as a skating rink rather than putting in the skate trail. With respect to trails, there was a lot of interest in the trails, people asking for connections between the natural areas and the commercial areas to be able to make access easy. With respect to parkland, there was interest in ensuring there are drinking water fountains on site, barbecue and picnic areas, and technology throughout the site as well. Transportation and active transportation, there were a lot of comments on this. We had a focus group that looked at this as well. So they actually, some people submitted design concepts to us for pedestrian crossings and what that could look like, as well as bike lanes in the area. We were informed that the county is updating the CWAT system and they will take Front Road into consideration for active transportation. Those participating were impressed with the active transportation master plan and the planning of that, and suggested that it was one of the best in the region with bike lanes on Front Road that would allow people to visit the park easily. They liked the idea to slow traffic in the area. And there were some who suggested that they would like to be part of advocating for the active transportation master plan, again, gaining support from commuters. The business focus group, on the other hand, didn't want to see traffic slowed on Front Road as they thought it would affect their business operations. And there was concern that turning Front Road into one lane would make it difficult for somebody with a large boat trying to turn into a parking lot. With respect to the outdoor pool, there were only a few comments made about the outdoor pool, and those were all in favor of keeping the outdoor pool in operation. With respect to dedications and naming, we had a few requests from family members who would like to see somebody recognized at the park due to their history and our heritage. It's those are all things that we're looking into to see how we can incorporate it into the park. There were some questions about the naming of the park. As you know, we didn't use Petite Côte because IRCA has Petite Côte just down the road on Front Road, so we translated that to Small Coast. We did get some negative feedback about that people were not in favor of that translation. Although we have noticed Small Coast has seemed to catch on some, and there are people who are already calling the park Small Coast. And with respect to some of the general comments that we received overall, a minority of the respondents are not in favor of the project, requesting more time for additional input and requesting that council not spend the tax dollars at this time. But overall, the majority of comments received were very positive. Of course, with some requesting that council be cognizant of the tax rate, especially while we're dealing with COVID. Some of the other comments that we received, the Accessibility Advisory Committee talked about including Braille on signage. They talked about levels of the basketball nets for wheelchair users to be able to use the nets on specific days, and including an accessible swing for kids and adults at the playground. The Tourism Windsor Essex Pelee Island focus group talked about the info huts. They liked the idea of the info huts, thought that it would be a wise decision to include artwork pieces and use local artists to be a part of that. Perhaps giving people photo ops and places where they can take photos and show those on social media and use hashtags about the park and about LaSalle. We did have also a focus group with the University of Windsor with respect to the Freshwater Research Center, which is currently located at River Dance. We all agree this is a real bonus in the area for reintroduction of biology education and outreach. So we talked about ways that we could expand that learning and get more people involved in that learning. The University of Windsor will continue helping with the monitoring of rising levels of water on the Detroit River. They also suggested an environmental monitoring station could be on site that could be used as an education piece. And they also talked about the inclusion of a public aquarium that would be similar to a walk-through facility that's available year-round, that would be linked to the waterfront, to the fish, to the ecology in the Great Lakes and in the Detroit River. And we could partner with the university so that they would give the students the opportunity for somewhere to work and to learn and to get their schooling as well. So as a quick overview, this brings us to the end of the feedback that we received through this portion of consultation. We are expecting that we will go back to the community as we get through more phases and future phases to include the community to be part of the decision-making going forward. And now I'll turn it over to Kevin. Let me just unshare my screen and then he can continue the presentation.
Thank you, Don. Your worship, members of council. Don, perhaps if you could put up the site plans that I did send you. What I'd like to do for council, just quickly walk through the recommendations that we had laid out for council in the report. And as we go through the recommendations, talk a little bit about how they relate to some of the input that we received from the public and what the go forward position is with the project now that this phase of consultation is over. Do you have the plans there, Dawn?
Yeah, sorry, just 1 second here.
Just wanted to note that we did receive a lot of really good comments and suggestions from the public as part of this process. But I think what I would say is after reviewing all of those and having some discussions, I don't really believe there was anything that was given that would really alter the phase that council adopted back in December. We certainly were going to take the opportunity to incorporate a number of the comments that we heard as we go forward. Do you have the plans, Don?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying here.
Okay. So the first two recommendations that are with the report are simply to receive the information that has been given to council this evening. The third one speaks to finalizing the plans for the event center. Can you go to the overall one, Don?
Can you see that right now?
Yes.
Okay.
That'll do for now. So there we go. So this is the overall plan that would have been circulated and people commented on. From the event center perspective, there was one comment that we received about the potential for a second floor restaurant in the area. I think it's administration's view that we continue on with this strictly as an event center that was proposed. Restaurant opportunities, we heard through the consultation process a lot of demand for restaurants, and we have provided for some pad locations along Front Road where certainly we could entertain those types of uses, but for the event center itself should remain as such. So from the recommendation side, we've been continually working with those plans, and we would look to council to support the recommendation to move forward with the event center plans, to tender those relatively quickly. Our architect is saying that we could look at a completion date of around December of this year, depending on when we receive the bids back in and the actual construction, but sometime around December, perhaps leaking slightly into 2022, depending on construction. The next recommendation deals with the sports area. Don, could you go back to the previous slide? So this area provides for the construction of 4 new tennis courts, 3 new sand volleyball courts, and a potential for a basketball court. We're getting a provisional quote for the basketball court. We're not sure that that will fit within the budget that we have allocated for 2021. This is subject to the COVID resilient grant, and that grant needs to be spent by the end of 2021. So the focus right now is to get that tender released as well, so that we can have that construction completed within the timeline for the grant. One of the studies that's currently ongoing right now is the second phase of the archaeological study. The phase 2, that is just starting now. We've sent out the consultation to the Indigenous communities for that work. We're hoping that that can be completed within the next month or so, and then we can get completed. We did receive a correspondence through PlaySpeak and email from the owner on Adams Lane, right at the corner of Adams Lane and where it turns to go into Laurier Drive, the vacant piece of property. And the request was to extend the bioswale that's adjacent to the parking area northerly, which would be what is shown through the basketball court. What we've come to learn since the drawings were prepared by JP Thompson is Stantec has done some soil testing for us in the area. And what they have recommended to us is that based on those soil conditions, the bioswales will not function properly for stormwater management purposes. So as such, those bioswales will be deleted from the plan. Mr. Mara could likely speak a little more detail about the methods for stormwater management, but from the owner's comments, we won't be extending that bioswale because we won't be building them in the first place, but we will maintain that buffer area that you see on the plan backing onto the homes on Adams Lane between their properties and any new construction that occurs within the park. The second, the number 5 bullet point deals with the historical home, the Benoit House. There'll be a report coming to council, I believe. I think Patty is in the meeting, but I understand that we will have a report coming to council at the end of this month that will provide some more detail and direction and recommendations to council about how we move forward with converting that property into a museum. So that 3 components really entails the work for 2021. And we would look to council to endorse those recommendations. Beyond that, in the phase that we have been looking at, deals with the pump station, the ongoing master plan study that is working with completing the stormwater management along the Detroit River in its entirety, and to construct the skate trail and water feature. That is not likely going to occur until sometime, at least probably into 2022 or 2023. Much of that will be contingent upon completion of the environmental studies that are required to be reviewed and approved by local, provincial, and federal authorities that have jurisdiction over the water courses, being the Detroit River. We'll have jurisdiction over the marina inlet and to the stormwater inlet just south of the marina. So we're going to require a number of approvals before we can commence construction on those features. That is all included as part of the initial phase budgeting that was approved by council, that $18 million number. I think one of the things that we heard through the consultation process was a lot of comments surrounding the boat ramp. We had a number of comments about keeping it in its current location. We had a number of comments about, if we're going to move it, let's make sure that it's big enough, the parking lot has sufficient room for boats. That is a project that is probably a minimum of 5 years in the future, not part of this phase. So that gives us ample time to explore the soil conditions that are in the area, to get the approvals that we need to get from the provincial and federal governments for access into the canal system. One of the comments we did receive from a couple of the marina owners were that they were concerned that the town was going to get into the marina business and compete with the local marine businesses along the Detroit River. What we expressed during our engagement process was that council was looking at perhaps some transient spots in the western part of the canal that would serve day-to-day use when people come to visit, so that we would have the opportunity when people kind of come and enjoy the activities at the park. They can come by car, they could walk, they could take their bike, they can come by transit, and they could also come by boat. So those are things that we will continue to look at as future phases occur. And as Don mentioned, there will be anticipated future public consultation when those phases come into place. The last recommendation is that we do continue on with the studies that we mentioned. We've engaged Stantec. They are currently doing the natural heritage feature studies for us, the archaeological studies for us. We're doing the stormwater management studies that we require. The report that's coming to council in April will talk about obtaining the services of a consultant to help us through the master planning process for the museum as well. So we would like to continue on in that process to get all of those studies and approvals that we need to get both these phases and future phases in place. So with that, Your Worship, I think if there's any questions from council and timing, I know one of the questions that did come up was about the current pool. According to the plan, the outdoor pool would stay in place at least until the water feature was constructed, as the ice feature, water feature is constructed, and that's not until viewed probably until 2023, until all those studies are complete. The only caveat I would put to that is that you'll notice on the plan that Don had put up that the commercial pads are showing where the pool is now, so that if for some reason council determined that the commercial components were required prior to that time, that would be the only thing that I would say that could impact that timing quicker than the water feature. But again, that's entirely within the control of council. to determine when the commercial goes forward or when the pool would actually move. I think with that, I'm certainly open to any questions on the timing of any of the phases, the costing of any phases. I think Mr. Meyer is available to talk about the engineering side of the stormwater management or any of the phases as well. So Your Worship, I could turn it back over to you for council questions.
Sorry, I was muted. Councillor Carrick, then Councillor Reno.
So just in regards to the pumping stations, what's the timelines for that? If Peter could answer that, or someone.
Thank you. Certainly, we are embarking on an environmental assessment. We are just in the process of trying to finalize a notice of study commencement. So we are into about a 12 to 18 month study process to evaluate what is the final solutions and what do they encompass and the drainage areas. It's been a bit slow going with respect to trying to gather the appropriate information. Again, with the restrictions and with trying to share information between the consultant and the town, we try to do everything digitally, and it's been a little bit of a back and forth trying to just get background information and documents in place. So certainly we're into a study component of about 18 months. And then subject to the finalization of that study, then we can proceed to detailed design and construction. So by the time we get into the work in this northern section of Front Road between Turkey Creek and Laurier, we're probably looking at about 24 months before we actually start to see shovel in the ground and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you. And this is terribly exciting, and we need to show something. So keep up the good work.
Councillor Reno, then Councillor Dirichio Spagnolo.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you can imagine, this project has garnered a lot of attention. I think our team has done a good job of getting the news out and collecting all the information. I think the report is excellent because, I mean, it's gone down to small details that people have put out there. People, you know, it's funny because I read through the report and the report says my voice is not being heard. Well, meanwhile, it's in the report. So I think Don and the people that are involved in collecting that information, you've done a great job of presenting it to council. My question now, and this may be for Don, moving forward, I want to know what job council will have to do. For example, one of the things I read in the report, which people are quite passionate about, we talked about the naming. I saw Mr. Shepu's name in there, and other things that people were passionate about when it came to the history of LaSalle. What role does council now play moving forward? Will we be presented with programming ideas, or is that left to administration? I'm getting questions as to whether or not people can come and speak before council based on these 300 propositions that they put forward, and I've just told them that it's not the right time today. This is a bigger scope right now, but those fine details, what role does council play?
Don, do you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, sure. So going forward, you know, with things like the naming and that type of stuff, that's something that we're going to look at next, and we'll bring some information back to council. So we have received requests for naming. We are looking at options of how we can put a display up down at the park so that maybe it's not individual benches or trees, but maybe there's one location where we look at all the different people that we can do dedications to in that area. We're also looking at the overall name of the park. Is Small Coast the right name? So that's something that we're looking at as well, and we'll bring that back to council. As for programming, I don't know if Ms. Finero wants to answer this, but we're looking at programming options, and that's something that would either come to council or through the Parks and Rec Committee as well as we go forward to decide what would work best down there. And of course, starting out slow and trying, different options and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and being able to move forward from there and being able to pivot as things change as well. Whether it's COVID or not COVID, being able to change with what interests people and being able to bring that stuff forward to give people, we want people to come down there a lot. It's not going to be the same thing all the time. We want to change it up. We want to have different festivals and different events that attract different audiences as well. So that's all the type of information that we're researching now to go through to see what would be the best options to bring forward in putting a plan together too, maybe a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, being able to look ahead as well to see exactly what would work. And as we bring on the different phases, how we can incorporate those into planning, into programming as well.
Okay, thank you, Don. I think the report is very well done and it's very transparent. I think one of the comments that was thrown at me was that you guys have got your plan and you're going to do what you want anyway. And I don't think that's possible now, because now you've put everybody's feelings on paper and they are a public document now. And now when we debate this in the future, we have this tool here and the public has the tool. And I think this is a very good step forward in transparency. And I think it was very well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. And I have to say, Don and Kevin, you did a great job of simplifying over 100 pages of documents into a few-minute presentation. So thank you. Councillor Licio Spagnolo.
Hi there, through you. This is more of a comment than a question, but I just think that you've showcased the waterfront front road area wonderfully. You've reached pretty much every demographic when it comes to sporting and events and the ice rink and just so many different areas that you did capture, which is wonderful. Accessibility is a big thing, so I'm happy that that is part of this as well. And yeah, I'm really happy with the report, and I think you guys all did a great job and summarizing everything in such a quick little area that you just presented to us tonight. So thank you for that. And I'm hoping that residents do come forward with, you've given them ample opportunities to come forward, and hopefully we can keep doing that for our residents so then they can voice their opinions and their thoughts and their concerns. So then we can take that to wherever we want to go with this, continue going with this project. So thank you for your time with this. I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Mr. Miller, I had a resident ask me about the bioswale, and I understand why we are where we are. Can you just explain to me, so if I'm asked, I can articulate it, the soil sampling or the rationale for that, sir? I didn't quite get it in a manner that I'm comfortable articulating it back to anybody who asked me that question.
Maybe I'll hand that one over to Peter.
Sure.
Thank you. The bioswales were a low impact development type of stormwater management treatment. Again, this is something that really helps to address climate change and trying to do low impact development types of treatment. With respect to a bioswale, it was going to be something that would allow water to drain into a low-lying area. It would have vegetation in it, and the expectation was that that water would percolate into the ground, and that's how it would dissipate. But again, we're along the Detroit River. Groundwater levels are high. That is not going to work well given what that percolation rate would be, what the technical matters are relative to the existing soils composition. So those types of things are not available in terms of the bioswale. There are other mechanisms that we are looking at trying to continue to lessen the impact on the environment with respect to low impact development. We will be looking at tree wells and things of that nature where water will run off into the tree wells and it will provide watering for those larger trees and things of that nature. But that is the reason why the bioswales aren't functioning at this point. Again, it was a high level concept at the very beginning put forward by the architects, and certainly as we start to flesh out some of the details of how we engineer it and how it will function in the long term, it starts to either work or we have to eliminate it and move on with a different option. So that is hopefully provide you a bit more technical information than you probably wanted, but certainly I'm available for a phone call and if you wanted to get a bit more detail on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mara. I understand, and I'm sure that I'm going to relay this to the citizen to call you. I don't want to have a social miscue. Your explanation was excellent. Thank you, sir.
It's another example of engineers squashing the planners.
Get along, guys. We're all in the same sandbox here. Any other questions? Peter, I have one following up on the bioswales. The one that's in the program, in the demonstrations slides that Don put forward goes east-west behind the proposed courts and behind the homes on Adams Lane. That seems to be a big area. If we don't use bioswales and something else that could work, could we not add features, budget being kept in mind? For example, pickleball courts or tennis courts or another basketball court, if we're not going to put bioswales, because it seems to be a large area that you were contemplating putting in the bioswales.
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that is an option for council as either areas are freed up. You could look at increasing putting more features down there. For example, another basketball court, another pickleball court, another playground, whatever council wishes to review. Of course, that will be looked at through future budgets. So certainly as some of those areas become available for additional features, whatever council wishes to explore at those options in those areas, if they fit within that footprint, certainly that becomes available.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Mr. Melissa, did you want to say something? Okay. Sorry, I thought I saw you. Okay, council's pleasure. Deputy Mayor Malash, moving the all 6 recommendations. Seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Is that the hand I saw? All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Don, Kevin, Peter. Great presentation. Schedule of reports for council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, support by Councillor Vidicio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. We have 6 bylaws on all 3 readings. Councillor Desjardins and Councillor Reno, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Council questions. We'll go with Councillor Akpata, Councillor Carrick, and Councillor Desjardins.
Through you to Peter. Peter, I've had a couple of calls about some disruption in what I'm going to say is the easement in front of people's houses. I understand, as you've explained to me before, that various cables and lines and things like that exist in property that people sometimes take and see as their own. I've had a couple of calls about whether it's cables or new phone lines or things of that nature. Peter, can you explain to me how these companies work, what their procedures are, so that I can explain it back to the people who give me some phone calls, sir, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly the right-of-way, the public right-of-way that lies within the front property line of all residents exists. It is about 18, if the road has a curb, it's about 18 to 20 feet from the back of curb, which is considered a public right-of-way in town property. Within there are a number of utilities that provide the services to all the residents. Through the fiber network expansion through MNSI and Bell Canada, they have went through the town and they continue to go through the town, installing fiber right to the homes, providing a great internet connection for our residents. Certainly, if the disruption has occurred from one of those contracts, they can contact the town. They would have been given a letter if they're not getting a proper response from the Bell or MNSI or the contractor out there. Certainly, they can contact the town's Public Works Department, and we will ensure that those get taken care of. With respect to, I hope that is with respect to your concern is it's the larger fiber installs that may be occurring. There are instances where, again, one-off repairs are done through, again, from the town standpoint, a water main break may occur. We take care of restoring those situations where water where water main break may occur. But certainly other utility companies from time to time have to either replace a cable servicing the house, whether it's Bell, whether it's hydro, or things of that nature. So the actual utility company would be responsible for the ultimate restoration. And so if they have these one-offs and if they know who the company was that did the disruption, certainly we would try to help out the residents in making contact and seeing if things are done, get resolved and restored back to existing conditions. So hopefully that provides you the information, Councillor Acapetta.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your administration. In regards to the keeping the theme of Front Road, the old arena property, I think this was brought up before, and I'm not sure. I think actually maybe the deputy mayor brought this up in the past. But is there future plans? Are we anything in the wheelhouse coming with that? Is there an opportunity maybe we should be looking at since we're aggressively pursuing the Front Road and trying to help out?
Mr. Militia, who wants to take that one?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I didn't quite hear it all.
Okay, it was in regards to the old arena property up on Front Road there. So is there some future plans, something possibly we're looking at, something we can take advantage of, given what's going on and what we're doing down the road?
Certainly, it's an area that we are interested in redevelopment. We have had some developers come forward from time to time looking at the property. Again, we haven't been as active in that area to put it up for sale. I think we had it up for sale at some point in the past. And we did not get very many offers on it at the time. I believe that might have been even when the arena was still on the property before we demolished it. So we'll circle back and take a look at that property to see how we can entice development on that property. But we have had some developers come forward and looking at that area. There is, again, as we start to make more and more investments on Front Road, we can anticipate that any vacant property, including the arena site, will become more sought after and for developments on residential and non-residential basis. So we will circle back with that and come back with a report to council on that.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you, I think this would probably go to administration. I've been dealing with Roxanne on some bylaw issues, clean yard bylaws, and I was surprised to find out that we don't actually have a property standards bylaw on the books. And I wonder how we go about correcting that or doing that. There was one several years ago, and the responsibility changed over to be part of the building code. And it seems that that's where we lost track of this particular bylaw. So I'm looking for some direction on how we get that corrected and how we move forward with that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Mr. Solani, before you answer, is that two separate bylaws, property standards and clean yard bylaw, or are they one of the same?
No, they're separate bylaws. The clean yard bylaw was the decision of council to move forward a number of years ago with respect to that type of a bylaw, which dealt with the property itself, the outside of the property, whereas property standards deals with building conditions and deals with even things like if a landlord doesn't maintain the property and complaints from renters and things like that. So it is a much more comprehensive type of bylaw, and there's more onerous requirements, legal requirements to have a bylaw like a property standards committee, and there are appeal processes and things like that. So it's a different type of enforcement mechanism. And up till now, council in LaSalle has decided it did not want to go into that area, and it stayed with Clean Yard under the Municipal Act. But certainly, if it's the pleasure of council to revisit that, we could do so. And the bylaw committee would be, my suggestion would be, if that's the wish of council, the bylaw committee could investigate that further with the assistance of legal. Now that we have a legal counsel on staff as well, we could bring forward some information through the bylaw committee and then to all of council on what the pros and cons of a property standards type regime would be compared to Clean Yard, and what additional resources, because there'll be additional resources in terms of staffing and additional budgetary requirements as you go forward into property standards compared to Clean Yards.
For sure. I appreciate that. I thought, to be honest, as the mayor asked, that they were kind of the same thing, but apparently they're not. So if we could just take a look at maybe what's involved, I'd appreciate it, and we can move forward with it. Because some of the concerns I've had over the last few weeks have been more building standards versus clean yards. So if we could do that.
I just make a comment that we are aware of a couple concerns. And when you go through the legal process, especially now with the courts closed, it is time consuming in some of those cases. So that's a good report to come back with, Mr. Solani, with the pros and cons. Thank you. Councillor Renner.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, anytime a shovel goes in the ground, there seems to be a lot of excitement. And there's been a lot of excitement down off of Laurier Parkway that's going to lead to a couple questions. We have a new development that we've obviously already approved that's between Disputed and Huron Church off of Laurier Parkway. The shovels are in the ground. I was approached wondering if there was going to be an access road to that new subdivision off of Laurier Parkway, and it's kind of a two-part question. A, they wanted to know if there was one, and B, they felt that there was some kind of understanding, and this would be predating me and predating other members of council, that said that Laurier Parkway would never have a road off of it, never have an extension off of it. I just wanted to know what our standard is for the parkway, and if there is going to be a cut through to that new development.
Peter, before you answer that, can you also include, maybe make a comment on the road closures we're going to have there?
Yes, thank you. So certainly this is the Land Corps development, the Horizon Group that is proceeding with development out there. They are completing that land in between, what the remnant piece of land that's between Donato subdivision and Laurier, all south of Laurier between Huron Church Line and Disputed. So certainly Mayo Boulevard exists, and that will continue northerly and tie into Laurier. So Laurier will have intersections, and it will have few intersections along the way. So certainly there will be one additional intersection in between Huron Church Line and Disputed that will provide a connection southerly and eventually will provide a connection northerly. Again, Laurier has been designed as a arterial road. When that EA went through in 2009 and built in 2010, it was always intended to be 4 lanes. The first 2 lanes were built because that was what's available out there in order to open up the lands. And certainly as that area matures and development continues, there will need to be connections to that road. Again, we got to get people off the arterials and into the subdivisions, and Mayo Boulevard is classified as a collector. So rightly so, the traffic will go off of arterials onto a collector and then onto the local roads and kind of start to create that spider web in that distribution of traffic. So certainly there is going to be intersections along the way into Laurier, and I'm unclear whether that was something that was identified as never occurring. It's certainly identified in our transportation master plan on how and what occurs. So certainly in our transportation master plan, you'll see a number of new collector roads that will intersect with Laurier, and also the development of the lands along the Laurier corridor will provide driveways out to Laurier as well. So certainly that's what council can see and expect there. The transportation master plan really lays that out well, and that's available on our website for anybody who wants to see. With respect to servicing of that subdivision, one of the first things they need to do is bring in the sanitary sewer, and the sanitary sewer to access that subdivision is actually located at the intersection of Disputed and Laurier. That sanitary sewer is about 30 feet deep, and it's real tricky soils out there. So certainly they need to extend that sanitary sewer down Laurier towards Huron Church Line and bring it into the subdivision. Just from the magnitude of the work that has to occur, Laurier will be shut down for a period of time, and I believe that will be starting on Monday. as the contractor brings that sanitary sewer down Laurier to service the site, but it also provides service to those houses on Huron Church Line eventually. It is being sized enough to pick up all of those existing houses on Huron Church Line that exist today, and things of that nature. So certainly there is going to be a bit of disruption with respect to Laurier being closed. In fact, it's probably going to be closed a number of times. Again, they'll get it closed for the sanitary sewer, get the sanitary sewer installed, probably open it up again, but there'll be other utilities that have to be installed, such as there will be some storm drainage. They will be doing a small bit of road work in creating the intersection. So periodically the road will have to be closed for short periods of time, but we do want to open it in between those instead of leaving it closed for an extended period of time. So hopefully that answers your question with some additional information as well.
It does very well. If I could get a comment on one little other thing. We did receive an email about a new connection that would be coming from Howard Avenue. Can you just explain what that's going to be? Is that going to be a new, does that mean we'll be able to go straight down Howard right to Laurier Parkway, or am I misunderstanding that?
Thank you. Right now, the intersection of Howard and Laurier is missing a right turn, a southbound right turn onto Laurier. So right now it's a through lane, and people have to, if somebody's trying to make a right turn and somebody stop at the light, they can't make a right-hand turn. They got to wait for the light to change. So what the MTO through the Windsor-Essex Mobility Group is doing is they are constructing a dedicated southbound right turn lane at that location. So those who want to turn right on Laurier can now turn right on the red light and not have to wait for that through traffic. So that's what's occurring at that particular intersection.
Perfect. That clarifies it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I was there today. It's pretty congested.
Any other council questions? Reports from committees. Notices of motion. Confirmatory bylaw, first reading. Councillor Reno, Councillor Riccio Spagnolo, all in favor. That carries. Second reading. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Carrick, all in favor. That carries. Third and final reading, Councillor Akpata and Councillor Desjardins, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. It's a good informative meeting tonight. Everybody have a safe night. Thank you for viewing audience. If you, whoever has joined us.